I really appreciate you helping me out in this weather.
Of course. Almost got it fixed for you.
In the heart of New York City, a young billionaire CEO lost everything after a tragic accident left her paralyzed. One rainy evening, her wheelchair broke down on a lonely street until a humble mechanic stepped in. What happened next would not only change her life, but inspire millions. Stay with us till the end to see how a single act of kindness can restore hope. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Now let's get started. In New York City, life never slowed down. The skyscrapers stretched high into the clouds, and people rushed through the streets with coffee in hand, their minds always on the next meeting, the next deal, the next success. Among them stood Isabella Grant, only 28, but already a name etched in the world of business. She was the CEO of a rising tech empire, the kind of woman who commanded boardrooms with her sharp mind and unshakable confidence. Colleagues admired her, rivals envied her, and magazines often called her the young woman who built an empire before 30. But all of that power, wealth, and respect could not shield her from life's cruel twist. A year earlier, Isabella had been involved in a devastating car accident on the Brooklyn Bridge. Her luxury sedan, sleek and silver, spun out of control after a reckless driver clipped her side. The crash left her paralyzed from the waist down. In an instant, the confident, unstoppable CEO, who once walked into offices with her head high, now found herself bound to a wheelchair. It was not just her body that felt trapped. Her soul, too, carried the weight of the change. She tried to keep her empire alive, showing up to meetings with the same flawless suits and sharp voice, but behind closed doors she struggled. The woman who once loved walking through Central Park on weekends, dancing at charity galas, and hiking upstate with friends, now felt confined. She spent more time in silence, staring out her penthouse windows, watching the city glow beneath her, wondering if it still had space for her dreams. The loneliness was suffocating, the silence louder than the busiest street below. That rainy afternoon, the city was wrapped in grey. The sky opened, and droplets poured onto the bustling sidewalks of Brooklyn. Isabella had insisted on attending a small meeting near the waterfront, determined to prove to herself that she could still move forward. She had her custom wheelchair, designed with the best technology money could buy, sleek black with polished wheels that glided smoother than most. But technology has its limits, and fate has its own timing. Halfway down a narrow street, the chair jolted, whirred, and suddenly stopped moving. She pressed the buttons again, her hands trembling as nothing happened. The rain soaked through her coat, dripping down her face. The people around her rushed past without stopping, too busy to notice a young woman stranded in the rain. For a moment, Isabella's chest tightened, fear creeping in. What if she couldn't move at all? What if she was stuck here, humiliated, just another broken figure in the chaos of the city she once ruled? It was then that a voice broke through the sound of the storm. "Need a hand?" She turned her head and saw a man standing under the doorway of a small garage. His clothes were simple: faded jeans, a flannel shirt smudged with grease, and strong hands that spoke of long hours with tools and engines. His hair was slightly messy, his eyes kind yet sharp, the kind that noticed more than most. This was Ethan Miller, a 33-year-old mechanic who had taken over the garage from his father. For a second, Isabella hesitated. She wasn't used to strangers offering help. Most people either looked at her with pity or admiration, never with simple kindness. She studied him carefully, suspicious of motives. He wasn't a doctor, not a technician from the high-end company that built her chair. He was just a mechanic, and yet there was something disarming about the way he stood, not pushing, not pitying, just offering. She swallowed hard, her pride battling her need. Finally, she gave the smallest nod. Ethan jogged over, rain pelting his shoulders, and crouched beside the wheelchair. His hands brushed against the wet wheels as he examined them. "Looks like your motor gave out," he muttered, more to himself than to her. Isabella glanced at him, surprised at the confidence in his tone. "You know how to fix this?" she asked, her voice carrying both doubt and hope. Ethan grinned faintly. "I fix cars, trucks, even the occasional lawnmower. A chair's not much different, just smaller wheels and bigger responsibility." She raised an eyebrow, not sure if she should laugh or argue. Yet when he gently unlocked the brakes and pushed her toward the garage, she let him. The rain was still falling, but for the first time in months, she didn't feel entirely alone. Inside the garage, warmth and the smell of motor oil wrapped around her. It was messy but alive, a place of work, not show. Tools hung on the walls, old cars sat in corners, and the floor bore stains of years of repairs. To Isabella, who lived in a world of polished glass offices and spotless floors, it felt strangely grounding. Ethan wheeled her closer to a workbench, his movements careful, respectful. He didn't speak much at first, just examined the wheelchair with the focus of someone who cared about getting it right. Isabella watched him fascinated. There was no arrogance in him, no rush. He didn't seem intimidated by her expensive clothes, her aura of power, or even her disability. He treated her as if she were just human. For a woman who had been placed on pedestals her whole life, then brought crashing down, that was something rare. "Why are you doing this?" she finally asked, breaking the silence. Ethan glanced up, his hands tightening a bolt. "Because you needed help," he said simply. She blinked, realizing she couldn't remember the last time someone had helped her without expecting something in return. She leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. Something inside her shifted just a little. A thread of trust formed, fragile but real. That night the storm raged outside, but in the warmth of the small Brooklyn garage, something unexpected began. Isabella, the woman who thought her life had ended with that accident, found herself staring at the mechanic with grease-stained hands and steady eyes. For the first time in a long while, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't over yet. Ethan wheeled the chair into the heart of his garage, wiping rainwater from the handles. The storm outside rattled the roof, but inside the space hummed with quiet purpose. Isabella sat nearby, her sharp eyes following his every move. She had never been inside a place like this before, where the air carried the scent of oil and steel, where every tool had a story. For someone used to luxury, the garage should have felt out of place. Yet strangely, she felt safer here than in the towering glass buildings where she spent her days. Ethan crouched, turning the wheelchair onto its side with care, like it was something precious. His hands moved confidently, unscrewing panels, checking wiring, and tracing the motor with the instinct of someone who understood machines not through manuals, but through feeling. Isabella tilted her head, surprised by how precise he was. He wasn't fumbling, nor was he showing off. He worked with quiet determination, as if helping her was the most natural thing in the world. She found herself watching him closely, curiosity pushing aside her usual guardedness. As sparks from his small soldering iron glowed, Isabella broke the silence. "You know, people usually don't look at me this way," she murmured. Ethan glanced up, puzzled. "What way?" She hesitated, her voice soft. "Like I'm not broken." His expression shifted, his brows furrowing. He set the tool down and met her eyes. "Because you're not," he said firmly. "A machine can break, a person. They're more than that." The words hit her deeper than she expected. She swallowed, realizing it had been months since someone spoke to her without pity or polite distance. She began talking more as he worked. At first, just small things, how her accident happened, how the city never slowed down even when her life stopped, how people looked at her differently now. Then the deeper truth spilled out. She spoke about how she once loved late-night walks, how she missed the feeling of independence, how she sometimes stared at her reflection, wondering if she was still the same person inside. Ethan didn't interrupt. He tightened bolts, rewired circuits, and simply listened. His silence wasn't empty, it was steady, grounding, and patient. For Isabella, it was strange to be vulnerable. As a CEO, she lived in a world where weakness was hidden, where every word was calculated, where no one could see her cracks. But here, in a messy garage with a stranger whose hands were stained with grease, she let the walls fall. Every confession lifted a weight off her chest. And the way Ethan nodded or offered a quiet, "I hear you," felt more healing than any therapy session she had sat through since the accident. Ethan worked long into the night, the clock ticking past midnight. The rain had stopped, but the garage was alive with small sounds, the clink of metal, the whir of tools, the occasional hum as he tested the motor. Isabella found herself lost in the rhythm of his work. She studied his profile, the way his jaw clenched in focus, the small scar above his eyebrow, the steadiness of his movements. For a man she had met only hours ago, he felt strangely familiar, like someone her life had been waiting to collide with. Finally, Ethan sat back, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. He gave a small smile, tired but proud. "I think she's ready," he said,
He adjusted
the side of the wheelchair
tightened the last
affectionately,
screws,
as
and
though
polished
it were
the
alive
frame
with a cloth. Isabella blinked in surprise. The chair looked different. Not just repaired, but improved. The controls moved smoother, the frame sturdier, the wheels balanced better. He had even cleaned the scratches from the armrests. It felt new, almost reborn. Ethan wheeled it toward her and gestured. "Go on, try it." Isabella hesitated. For months, the chair had felt more like a prison than a lifeline. She had grown to resent it. But now, as she transferred herself into the seat, something shifted. Her fingers brushed the controls, and with the lightest touch, the chair glided forward effortlessly. Her heart skipped. She pressed again, spinning in a small circle. Smooth, responsive, alive. For the first time since the accident, she felt free. A laugh escaped her lips, pure and unrestrained. It startled her, echoing in the garage like music. She hadn't laughed like that in months. She pressed the controls again, rolling faster, turning with ease, almost forgetting the weight she carried. She gasped between laughter. "It's perfect!" Ethan grinned, leaning against the workbench, watching her with quiet satisfaction. For him, this wasn't about fixing a machine. It was about giving someone back a piece of their life, and seeing her joy was worth more than any paycheck. Isabella's laughter slowed, replaced by something softer, tears welling in her eyes. She stopped the chair and looked at Ethan, her voice breaking. "You don't understand. You didn't just fix this. You gave me back something I thought I lost forever." Her words trembled, but her gaze was steady, piercing into him. Ethan's chest tightened. He rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly, unsure how to respond. He wasn't used to gratitude so raw. "I just did what I could," he murmured. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. The garage fell quiet, the storm now just a memory outside. Isabella felt warmth spread through her chest, a warmth she hadn't known in so long. She realized she wasn't just thankful for the chair, she was thankful for him, for his kindness, his patience, his refusal to see her as broken. In that messy Brooklyn garage, under flickering lights and oil-stained floors, something fragile but powerful bloomed. Not love yet, not fully, but hope. And for Isabella, that was the beginning of everything. In the weeks that followed, Isabella found herself drawn back to Ethan's garage more often than she expected. At first, she told herself it was just a check on the wheelchair to make sure everything was holding up. But deep inside, she knew it was more than that. The garage had become something rare, a place where she could exist without masks, without the crushing weight of being CEO Isabella Grant. Here, she wasn't judged for her chair, her title, or her scars. She was simply a woman, and Ethan saw her that way from the very beginning. Ethan welcomed her visits with the same calm warmth each time. He never treated her like a guest of honor or a charity case. Sometimes he was working on an old pickup truck, sometimes tuning up a motorcycle, and sometimes just tinkering with random pieces of metal. Isabella would sit nearby, listening to the hum of his tools, the scratch of his pencil as he sketched new designs on scrap paper, or the steady rhythm of music that played softly from a dusty old radio. For someone whose life had been filled with board meetings and deadlines, these simple moments felt like oxygen. One afternoon, Isabella rolled into the shop, carrying 2 coffees from a small cafe down the street. "Peace offering," she said playfully as she handed one to Ethan. He chuckled, taking it with a grateful nod. They sipped in silence for a while, then Isabella leaned back and sighed. "It's strange," she admitted. "For the first time in a long time, I don't feel like I'm drowning." Ethan glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe you just needed a reminder that you're more than what happened to you," he said quietly. His words struck her like a spark in the dark. Gradually, Isabella opened more of herself to him. She told him stories about her childhood, about the nights she stayed awake studying while her friends partied, about the loneliness of reaching the top so fast and realizing it was colder there than she expected. Ethan listened without judgment, sometimes offering small smiles, sometimes shaking his head when the pain in her words cut too deeply. And when she grew emotional, he never rushed her, never tried to fix what couldn't be fixed. He simply stayed by her side, steady and unshakable. Ethan, in turn, shared pieces of himself too. He told her about how he grew up in Brooklyn, about the father who taught him everything he knew about cars, and about the garage that was more of a legacy than a business. He confessed that he once dreamed of becoming an engineer, but life had other plans, and instead of college he took over the shop after his father's passing. "Sometimes," he admitted with a shrug, "I wonder if I settled, but then I think maybe I'm right where I need to be." Their conversations stretched for hours. Sometimes they laughed so hard the neighbors peeked into the garage to see what was going on. Other times they sat in silence, letting the sound of the city outside fill the space between them. And slowly, Isabella felt her world expanding again. She began to dream, not just of rebuilding her company or regaining her independence, but of living fully. She started picturing herself not as a paralyzed CEO, trapped in shadows, but as a woman with possibilities still ahead of her. Ethan had given her something no amount of wealth could buy: hope. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the garage in gold, Isabella looked at Ethan with tears shimmering in her eyes. Her voice trembled, but her heart was steady. "You didn't just fix my wheelchair," she whispered. "You fixed me." Ethan froze, the wrench in his hand slipping slightly as her words sank in. For a man who spent his life fixing broken engines and bent frames, hearing that he had repaired something invisible, her spirit was overwhelming. He smiled softly, not knowing what to say, but his eyes spoke volumes. Word of their unusual bond spread through the city. A wealthy CEO and a humble mechanic. It was the kind of story people didn't expect in New York. Employees whispered about how Isabella seemed lighter, more alive. Customers told others about the mechanic who helped a woman not just with her wheelchair, but with her life. Soon, newspapers picked up fragments of the tale, spinning it into something larger than both of them. Some called it a modern fairy tale, others a reminder that kindness could bridge the widest divides. Isabella didn't care much about the attention. For her, the story wasn't about the city or the press. It was about the quiet moments she and Ethan shared. It was about the laughter that echoed in the garage, the way she could breathe freely there, the way she rediscovered parts of herself she thought were lost forever. For Ethan, too, the outside world didn't matter. All he saw was the woman who had walked, rolled into his life on a rainy day, and changed it without even trying. Over time, Isabella's wheelchair became a symbol, not of limitation, but of resilience. She took it to board meetings, her head held high, no longer ashamed of the stares. When people whispered, she let them. When journalists asked, she spoke openly about her journey, about loss and healing, about how one act of kindness had lit a spark in her. She credited Ethan, though he always waved it off, saying, "I just fixed a chair." But deep down, they both knew it was more than that. One spring morning, Isabella arrived at the garage with a sketchbook. She flipped it open, showing Ethan pages of ideas. Designs for mobility aids, improved wheelchair models, innovations that combined her tech expertise with his mechanical genius. "I want to build something," she said, excitement dancing in her eyes. "Not just for me, for everyone who's ever felt trapped like I did." Ethan studied the sketches, then looked at her with pride. "Then let's build it," he said simply. And just like that, a new dream began, born not out of wealth or ambition, but out of compassion and second chances. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing day. It wasn't just about gratitude anymore. It was about trust, respect, and something deeper that neither of them rushed to name. They both knew that what they shared was rare. It was proof that even in a city as vast and relentless as New York, two lives could intersect in the most unexpected way and change each other forever. For Isabella, the transformation was undeniable. She no longer defined herself by what she had lost, but by what she had found: strength, resilience, and a man who believed in her when she had stopped believing in herself. For Ethan, it was humbling. He had spent years thinking his life was ordinary, just fixing what others discarded. But now he realized that sometimes the smallest acts, tightening a bolt, listening to a story, offering kindness, could create the biggest changes. And so, the story of the young paralyzed CEO and the mechanic spread far beyond the streets of Brooklyn. But for the two of them, it wasn't about fame or headlines. It was about the quiet truth they carried, that hope could be rebuilt, that broken didn't mean finished, and that sometimes the person who walks into your life on the rainiest day is the one who reminds you how to live again.